I'm going to record. Got it. Record. All right. We are on. So we're back today for the creativity talks with myself and Rene Urbanovich.
Yay.
And today we are diving into chapter 3 of Rene's book, which is about individual creativity run amok. So Rene, do you want to just kind of give a little overview of this section of the book?
Sure. Well, I didn't want to write a book just about the theories of creativity. I wanted to talk about the thing that seems to be bothering many of my colleagues and myself. And the problem itself is that individual creativity is misinterpreted, it's misrepresented, it's misunderstood. And so this chapter kind of talks about what's going on here. How can creativity be bad? There's no such thing as creativity that causes a conundrum. That can't be. So I kind of discuss why there is a problem. And I mean, we can go into it, and then we're going to talk about how we solve it later.
Right. Yeah. So you kind of sum up at the beginning of the chapter this problem by saying creativity is teetering heavily to one side with too much focus on products, which then causes an imbalance in society at large. And this actually made me think of what we mentioned in the last talk about the two extremes, the two poles of either like sort of the creative martyr and like genius, right? This like revered godlike kind of figure of the artist, and then the opposite extreme of like the creative narcissist.
Yeah, we did talk about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So in a sense, in one sense, it's like we have all these creative narcissists running around, and the other kind of hand of that is like maybe people feel this need, they have to be this creative genius, and so there's like product, this kind of like mantra of product. But before I dive into conjecture, why don't you unpack that a little bit?
Sure. Well, no, I think it struck a chord with you just to hear the words, especially, when you're a practitioner and you understand the huge importance of process. That when that triggers you, process over product, but what maybe other people aren't triggered by it because they don't get it, because they don't see process as importante. They just see the product, that when they're being creative, they're going to make something, or they're going to, write something, and they're missing the boat on the process. So basically, I just make like this big correlation between being a voice teacher and balancing the voice. So we have chest voice, middle voice, and head voice, and if we don't use that balance, we can literally wreck our voice. And then I give other examples about balance, like if we fish too much off the coral reefs, then we're going to ruin the ocean. And if we eat too much chocolate cake and not enough vegetables, it's going to ruin our bodies. And how important balance just is. And so for me, I was imbalanced as a voice, as a singer, and it cost me my career.
Yeah.
I became a voice teacher, and luckily I absolutely love teaching. I think more than performing.
Really? Wow.
Yes, I think I like it better. And so that's okay. But the research that I did as a voice teacher really taught me how important it is to have balance. So without balance in place, I don't think creativity can function on the micro and the individual level like it's supposed to, or on the macro. It's if that balance is offset for any reason, we do suffer. So it's hard to stand up and say, I'm sitting, but it's hard to proclaim that creativity, the way we're doing creativity, is just not helpful. And so I don't want to look at the way we're doing creativity and start picking at it, but we will. But my example in the book is when I went to speak at SAG-AFTRA. It's kind of the agency that does all the payments out to all the actors and singers or whatever. It's not an agency. They're in charge of everything, and you join it. It's kind of like a club. You have to belong to SAG or AFTRA to be a singer. And I was invited to do a little seminar. So I was really excited because the seminars I do, have been like for academia and for artists that are painters and, for the community. And I was so excited because I'm a singer and a singing teacher. So I went to the seminar and I performed it. I did the pot thing. I did the whole thing. And about halfway through, the person who hired me, his name is Gerald, he said, is there any way you can address what they do while they're waiting for their big break. And that's not what I was there to talk about. I was there to talk about creativity. So I said, yeah, I will. Yeah, I will. And I said, let me finish the PowerPoint first. And as we went on, I started to get in touch with my own pain and my own frustration as an artist or as an actor. And, when I used to act. And, I had friends that were actors, and literally they would wait tables and then they would just sit by the phone and wait for their agent to call. And um, it came to me that I had to address the fact that I had to address what the issue was. And by teaching them about creativity and what creativity is, the conundrum would go away if they understood why they're doing what they're doing, which we dabbled with last time we talked.
Right.
Why do we have this drive? What is it? And then I let them have it. And there were tears. There was unity. There was hand clapping. It was so powerful. And that's when I went, oh, I just have to write this down.
Yeah.
So anyway, I could go on. I don't know. We were going to talk about American Idol and how we started talking about that.
Right.
And how everyone has a voice. And what did you use? What word did you use? It started with a V. Voyeuristic. I think
the voyeuristic nature of American Idol and similar shows. Because we all look at that person, we say, I have a voice, I could do that. There's some little part of us, even if it's not conscious.
Yeah.
But I'm curious to dive into this talk that you gave to these, kind of diehard, let's say, creatives, right? Like, what was it that struck a chord with them?
Well, if I just tell you right now, then you don't get to the end of the book. I want for you to find it out in the order that I explained it.
I see. Okay.
But basically, we all are in the same boat. All of us. We're diehard creatives, and some of these singers feel like they just wait their entire lives for the break that they don't ever get. And if you're not a singer, then maybe you're an actor and you're waiting for your agent to book you. And maybe you're you're like a dancer and you never get on a Broadway show. I mean, do I have to go on and on? Or let's just say you're an Instagram person and you never get more than 11 likes. And every day you put the hashtags. Every day you work really hard and you never get your likes and you never get any feedback that is going to feed your soul. And it's just so painful. It's so hard when you feel called to do something. You feel absolutely called. You're compelled. You can do nothing except write. You wake up in the middle of the night and you write, and then no one reads what you wrote. It doesn't make sense to your heart and your soul. So the first step was just getting in the boat with them and going, it's a monkey on my back too. We all feel that. But then when we have the Instagram people, and Snap, well, that was when we had Snapchat, but we don't anymore. But what's the other one? TikTok. Yeah, TikTok. And we have this preoccupation with audience reaction right now, like we've never had. Like, it's completely new if you're my age. It's not new if you just were, kind of 13 years old when all this hype happened. But there was never this desperation for popularity and like online appeal and your dedication to your fans. So that marketing and creating kind of became this inseparable bedfellows, for lack of a better word. And it's what we talked about before. Is it selling out when you market, and creativity is necessary for marketing.
Of course.
Advertisers are freaking creative and they tap into their creativity all the time. So what could be wrong? What could be wrong with using your creativity? So if I do you want me to keep going?
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, if you want to throw something in, do.
I'm trying to race the sun. Basically I wanted to touch on a few things before we go on. So you talk about this balance of creativity and the function of creativity on the micro and the macro level that serves both the individual and society. And then you go on to talk about how conventional wisdom, or I would just say wisdom period ever, right? Question against getting support from the lowest common denominator. Because what is the lowest common denominator? It's all of our most base, most like impulsive parts of ourselves, right? And so this, as a philosophy major, I love this because you mentioned Plato and you mention in different words, he called them the philosopher kings, like the idea in Plato's Republic is that there's these philosopher kings, and they're kind of like the wise ruler, like the Solomon or the Emperor Asoka, in Buddhism, like this kind of ideal figure that really is self-surrendered, and they act, for the collective from a place of wisdom, because Plato's idea was that the collective can't act for itself. In a sense, it's a treatise against democracy on one level, because he noted the liability of together. The things we agree on, right, are like, I like to, put it in terms of, that we can understand, like, our impulse is always going to be to eat the chocolate cake, even if the carrot is better, right? So as a collective, that's what catering to the lowest common denominator does. It turns out these apps that are like 5-second sound bites, and it gets shorter and shorter. And then what information are we actually exchanging at that point? And are we just being entertained, or is there any kind of value being added to our lives?
Exactly. Yeah. Right? You got it.
Yeah.
And who did you say, was that Plato? Is it Plato? Or okay.
It's a Republic. Yeah.
Well, and somebody dies, and I did talk about that, how he was actually, was it Socrates poisoned? They poisoned.
Yeah, Socrates.
Hemlock.
Plato's,
hemlock, right.
Yeah.
Because of this, because he didn't believe in this whole selling out thing, because he believed that then truth would be watered down to meet everybody's, tickle their ears, like, to use that phrase. So, man, we're still going through the same thing. So as a human,
their ears. Oh, it's so good. Yeah. So basically the sophists of ancient Greece are the ones who condemned Socrates to death, because Socrates was basically like this bum, like this ugly, stinky, didn't shower kind of dude that hung out in the agora, which is like the marketplace. So, the closest thing is like a college quad these days, I guess. But, so the sophists, who are kind of like the equivalent of the Brahmin caste in India, they're kind of these intellectuals, like, they're kind of like the hot shit smart guys, who make all the rules essentially. And because he spoke out against them and of their bombast and arrogance and whatever, he's put to death for quote unquote corrupting the youth of Athens with basically principles,
basically, character qualities that are things that we need to have in our society, or we're all just going to be uncivilized. And
Exactly. So the question is, the enormous amount of creativity that's spent, let's say, in the marketing industry. I mean, look at the Super Bowl and the Super Bowl ads, and the capital that's spent, and the human capital that is the creativity that is harnessed and siphoned into creating those ads, just as one example. But that industry as a whole, So that seems to be serving some end, whether it's micro or macro. It may be neither, or it may be the end of economics, certainly.
Right. Well, when it's always economic is where there's a conundrum.
Right.
And if it's not economic, if you build a big enough tribe, then it will become economic. If it's just to gain followers and tickle their ears for us right now, but this is not new to society at all. Totally. They've been talking about this obviously since the beginning of, at least Western thought forms being birthed. And so I start to talk about this very thing by putting the cart before the horse. And even though I love creativity, and advertisers and marketeers use their creativity, and it's a fantastic phenomenon, it's being misused. And the fact that we can misuse our creativity reminds me of like a Batman movie, right? Like those guys like Joker and just the bad guys. They're so creative.
They're evil genius, right? Like,
but they're misusing the power of creativity. And so basically we're talking about the imbalance that an artist is going to emphasize the medium over the message. And that's Marshall McLuhan's saying, which I wish I could just say it in a short, quick way. But now that we're texting and we're doing little tiny screens this big, we have to shift the message. And now that the market is saturated, a daguerreotype which is a photograph on tin on metal that
Yeah.
took hours. You had to stand there with a metal rod up your back to hold still.
Yeah.
That was more valued than the millions and trillions of pictures that we take on our phone that we upload to the cloud. Which do we value more? There's a devaluing going on. It's the
Right.
same in the animal industry. Before there was this factory farming, I think a steak or a hamburger at least cost more than 20 years ago, a hamburger, whatever, the cost of a hamburger has gone to be cheaper than a piece of broccoli because
Right.
we're saturated with animals. So it's the same idea. The democratization of art being uploaded and being presented to the masses have caused um, us to care more about the product than the process. And so especially if you're young or you're not completely solid in your art and you don't know what development means, you put the cart before the horse. And so the people that are winning, the people that are wealthy, the people that are getting good feedback and good stroking and their ego stroked, and the people that are making it are not necessarily the people who have any substance, but they know how to market.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And so I don't want to begrudge the people that are making it, especially if they have a deeper message. There's this cute little girl that I met at a conference. I can't remember her name, but her Instagram handle was had the word soul in it for social media.
Mm.
Because she had been an Instagram star for a good 5 years and she completely lost herself and fell apart and got depressed. And so when she came back to her fans after her little hiatus, she changed her social media to be social media, and she really, really has the same kind of idea of for the masses that are presenting their work to have some kind of a soul in it, so that they don't lose themselves and go crazy and get depressed.
Yeah. Yeah. This reminds me actually of a professor of mine in school. She wrote a paper along with some other academics. I think Alan Canner and Mary Gomes were the primary writers. They talk about the narcissistic self, like this
Mm-hmm.
narcissistic self that is put forward, that is fueled by consumer need and filled by consumer need, but actually never is, right? Because it's a false self.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me, if they had written that piece in the time of social media, I think
Mm-hmm.
it would have had that much more traction, because there is this putting forward of like almost a foil character of ourselves.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, like this empty kind of dummy version of ourselves. And I think we do get confused. Is that me or is this me? Where's the
Uh-huh.
locus
Yeah.
control, right?
Right. And it's
Um,
hard to differentiate. And that's part of just being soulful is
right,
it's in the tension, it's in the exploration. That's how we get there.
right. So you're saying here, true artists care about the message. They're deeply connected to their art form. And the
Hmm.
creative drive is what compels the artists with a message. And as long as they're fulfilling that drive, they feel right. So as long as the message of the art and the creative drive is being filled, that they feel right. And I have an actual an experience I had is that I make a lot of stuff randomly. Like I get into, one week I'm into making stuff out of clay, and one week I'm into painting and whatever.
Hmm.
And I decided I have all these canvases and things like cluttering up my space. Maybe I'll start an Etsy and just sell them.
Hmm.
And I did it. I started taking pictures. And then I realized, like, okay, so what happens when this sells and then someone wants to order another one, and then I have to replicate the thing that I made.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
went
And then
through
it
this
turns into
whole
work.
it turned yeah as soon as I started having this like telescopic experience of what that was going to actually entail, and having to like do all the postage and weigh it, and I was like, oh no, 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 no,
Yep.
this is not
Yep.
why I do this. So I
Hmm.
ended up like leaving the Etsy shop open and not putting anything up. And then eventually what I did with it was I started making like these self-care products that I make in big batches, and I put them in jars, and they are uniform because the creative process happens in the recipe making more than the
Uh-huh.
right. So it actually works for that format. But
Yeah.
the other format where I was like, well, I only make one thing. Like I make a thing and then I'm done and I make a new thing. it doesn't work for commerce. If people were a fan enough of my work and they just wanted to buy one-offs, maybe that would work,
Yeah, yeah. I love
Um,
it. One off. I love that we get to talk about art and we throw in the business terms too. Let's circle back to I'm kidding. Um, so you're experiencing it on such a kind of what kind of level do you want to call that? Just a personal level. Just from how it would feed your soul to do it, but until it became all this marketing work or
yeah. Well,
packaging.
until it was the externally motivated thing, because the motivation is like the way a little kid, oh, I want to play with sand now I want to pick up these rocks, now I want to play with these leaves, now I want to go on the swings. That's how I relate to art making. And
Yeah.
I'm not a trained artist, I'm not like a particularly skilled artist or whatever.
Hmm.
And I that relationship to it is sacred to me,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I've lost it. There have been periods of my life where I was depressed and anxious, and the critic was too loud that I couldn't even make things with joy. And
So
so,
so you're saying exactly what this chapter is trying to set up, that when you put the cart before the horse, or that there's a product that has to be done and you lose the process, something is lost in that. And it's painful for the person, especially if they can't get it back, because there's a lot of shame that goes along with, oh, you're not selling enough, or how many units did you sell on your last recording, or how many likes do you have, or did you how many people showed up to your comedy event? I had this many. There's almost not a competition, but almost a competition. And
yeah,
then there's a little bit of shame that's like, if I have a singer that comes to me that's like over 50 or 60, we have so much fun because we know they're not trying to make it. There's not all this pressure. It's so fun. We just realize that we're here for the same reason here, to learn a skill, to have fun. You don't think you're going to make it. Not 50 or 60. You could be 30, but
yeah. I mean, that's been my experience with my new singing teacher up here in Washington. Is I was just getting so obsessed with Hildegard of Bingen. I was like, I
yeah,
have to
weird.
learn
You're
how to
so
sing
weird.
this. and
Yeah.
and we just nerd out so hard, and it's therapy, like
It's great.
just across the board.
Yeah.
It's physically and emotionally healing.
So as a society though, so where the problem is going is just um and there's so much support about applause and what philosophers said about applause, and Marshall McLuhan and what he said about the message, and even Neil Postman, who talked a lot in his book about he wrote a book called Amusing Ourselves to Death. So it was about how television was just going down and we should use it for other things. And, it's just everything is Las Vegas. Well, he would roll over in his grave right now if
Right.
he knew what was going on with social media. So I just set up this problem in a big way, and how painful it is as an individual. And then I don't know if this is where I take it in this chapter, but when you have lots of individuals who are using their creativity to no end other than frustration, that then the entire society is full of frustrated creative people who are not finding their joy and who are not contributing anything spectacular or substantial to society. Therein lies the conundrum.
Totally.
So, I try and set it up, but creativity right now, I think in our culture, it has a really positive feeling, and it's a great thing, but it's not just this buzzword for advertisers. It's not this buzzword. If people knew what creativity was and how they became a part of it and how it became embedded or hardwired into their brain, their relationship to it would be completely different, and we wouldn't be frustrated. We wouldn't be shallow. We wouldn't be competitive, and we wouldn't think that we need a million likes to be successful. We would be like you, singing Hildegard and nerding out and saying, I'm full of joy, and this is how I contribute to society. So I don't know, we could talk about the problem forever, but I really, really set up a big problem here, not just for the individual who's suffering, but all the suffering individuals that move on.
Yeah, and that to me is the big tragedy, and ultimately like what the core of your book is trying to prevent, in a sense, is to touch whoever reads the book, and kind of save that part of them
Yeah.
that's been taken over by the critic or the product
Hmm.
or commerce
Yeah.
or whatever it is, because it really is all about the process, and the process comes
Yeah.
back to just being present in the moment without
Hmm.
this kind of observer watching and controlling the self.
Exactly. And we did talk about that last week, and that meditation really spoke to me as far as trying to get lost in that without the critic.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's weird though, because even as I wrote the book, I hated every minute of it
Mm-hmm.
because and I sought counsel from a woman named Brooke, who was like a creativity life coach. And she even said this to me: you need to change your relationship with the work, because it was so hard and I was so miserable. It's just so hard to write an academic paper, let alone a whole book. And so she kept telling me I have to change my relationship with the book. And so I did the little tricks that she gave me. I invited David Bohm and Neil Postman and Leonard Shlain and, not Maya Angelou, because she's not dead, but people that I respected to sit with me. So I had to use my imagination. I had to change my relationship because I kept thinking, I'm no one's going to read this, right? And then one minute you'd think it was going to be a masterpiece. But at one point, I just have a little anecdote. At one point, I was becoming friends with a very famous poet, and I was so excited because she was really generous and nice. And I had said, "Oh, I'm almost done with my manuscript. I wonder if you could mention it to your agent, and it wouldn't sit in the slush pile. But like, it'd be really great to have it in." And she said, "Well, what's your book about?" And I said something like, "It's about creativity and how exactly what we're talking about, how there's a problem in society." She said, "Oh, no, 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 that'll never sell. You need to talk right away that you taught Bette Midler,
Yeah.
and you need to share your story about Bette Midler because you were her voice teacher before she went to Broadway." And I said, "No, no, 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 I can't. That's the exact opposite. That's exactly what my book's about. That I don't want to just rope people in and talk about somebody just to get attention for that. Like, do you not understand that's exactly what my manuscript is about? It illustrates the problem in society, that I'm going to jump the gun and just try and get people to read the book. I don't want to just water down my message." So,
Right.
but she said, "No, you have to." And she gave me a 5-point thing on how to do the book. And I was just like, "Oh my gosh, thank you. Thanks anyway."
Yeah.
But everybody kind of had their opinion that I ever talked to when I was writing the book. Like, everybody wanted me to include something. "Oh, make sure you put this in there. Oh, make sure you put that in there." And I thought, this is so funny. It's kind of like God, Everybody has their relationship with creativity, and they want to make sure that what they feel towards their own creativity is like represented.
Yeah.
So it's a vast subject, and I agree. But as far as the problem goes, I don't know. I think we framed it well enough. What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah. I think we did. There's one thing I wanted to go back on and touch on, is that you talk about kind of the history of print, and printing became cheaper in the 1800s,
Hmm.
and then that's kind of the emergence of sensationalism, when these sensationalist news stories began to circulate, because you didn't have to get out just the absolute essential information. You could kind of
Uh-huh.
start
Hmm.
creating stuff that wasn't as
Hmm.
as hard hitting or as essential, right? So then
Hmm.
telegraphs come, and then everything becomes more superficial. um and obviously, like, fast forward to today, and we have sound bites, and we have TikTok, and 10-second videos, and you make this point that the internet has degraded our quality of
Right.
communication, and that when the process is so easy, when we can just go 5 seconds, blah blah blah, and
Hmm.
post it, then the product becomes fluffy. And I think this point is so lost, especially in marketing around social
Hmm.
media, is that, oh, this is for connection, like, all these meta commercials. This is for connection. Look how we connect. Look at it, this, whatever it's called, the mirror, or the
Yeah.
whatever the new thing is, the portal or something. And the question for me has always been, just because you're accessible, it doesn't mean you're connected. And those
Good. Yeah.
are
Just because you're
so
accessible.
important,
Right.
right,
Yeah.
to distinguish, right? And so
Yep.
by the same thing with creativity, just because you're putting something out there, like, certainly it is fundamentally creative, as we've spoken about before, everything
Hmm.
is fundamentally creative, even taking a shit, you know
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
that's just
Always doing that.
who we are,
Right.
right? But if it's like what we're talking about, when the message, when the true like heart message, that's how I perceive it, when the divine speaking through you is obscured by the will, right? The small will of getting likes, of getting money, of getting recognition, of whatever, that's the moment that the message becomes distorted. And whatever truth was contained in that message is no longer available either to the creator or to the audience, right? And so that's what I see as the fundamental purpose of creativity, right? Is the conveyance of truth, beauty, and love, right? Like the kind of the trifecta of everything, right?
I love that trifecta. And you know what? It's when you say will, could we use ego? Do you mean ego?
Yeah. I mean, I call it like the will of the small self, or the will of the ego, versus like the universal or absolute will.
Yeah.
That when we surrender to the creative impulse, we're being carried by that rather than our own.
Yes.
You know, I want to make money. I want to get an agent. I want to whatever that is on top of it. You know.
Right, and that is a stress. The one little phrase that I loved that I put in here had to do with when you were saying the printing, first the printing, then the printing press, and then now the internet and all of that. What telegraphs did, according to Neil Postman, is they made relevance irrelevant. Nothing had to be relevant. It's okay because it's so easy now. And I feel like when you say the word connect, you have to, it's one thing to be accessible and another thing to connect. I love that. And I love that opposition of making relevance irrelevant.
Yeah.
So we study in the humanities, we study the function of art. So in my class that I devised, when they see a piece of art, whether it's music or whatever, like your favorite song, what is the function of that music, of that song? What is the function of that artwork? What is its relevance to culture? And where does it sit in history? And there's no right or wrong answers, but that kind of a relationship with your own creativity, that kind of analysis, that kind of interaction and exchange only connects you deeper to why you do what you do, even if you don't quite understand what creativity is yet.
Exactly. And that is the essential question that we are compelled to ask as human beings, because the reality is that whether it's 5-second sound bites, or it's a Disney movie, or it's an opera, or, whatever it is, or the Bible, or, the cave paintings in Lascaux, whatever we create becomes the narrative of society. And of course, some of the stuff just goes off into the ether, right? But the reality is that when we create something and we put that out there, especially if you look at kids and the way they watch YouTube today, like my kid included, that is his education, his cultural, social, ontological education. That's telling him what the world is like, what people are like, what he can be like, what he will be like. And that's an enormous responsibility, So even
that nobody's monitoring. Exactly. Well, YouTube tries, but there used to be the networks, right? The networks and the CBC, whatever it is. And so you didn't know if the television shows you were seeing were to brainwash us, or if they were reflecting what they already saw. Where did the television, where's that line? Are they reflecting what they see, or are they brainwashing us to be a certain way? But there's nobody doing that on YouTube. It's completely a wild west.
Totally. And in some ways, I love that from the creative perspective, that there isn't this kind of big brother thing going on. Because this is an important distinction too. Censorship is not the same as intentional communication, right? Like censorship is like the last ditch effort to have some control over ideas. But if we're actually looking at like the upstream process of creating culture, like let's say a wisdom culture, like Native American oral tradition, or, the grandmothers passing down stories to teach their children what is true and what is sacred, right? Like some people sitting in a boardroom saying, oh, that seems inappropriate, or that might offend someone. That's
Yeah.
worlds apart,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so in one sense, it's good that boardroom was never really doing us any favors in the first place, right? But at the same time, the smartest people in society, the most creative people in society, the people with all the money and the resources, the whatever, no one's having this conversation about what are we imparting to future generations? What statement are we
Yeah.
making about
Yeah.
life itself?
Right.
You know?
It's like that one of those time capsules when they pull it out and then they have to make the judgment on what's going to be up there. And I don't know if nobody's asking, but it's definitely getting for me, I don't know, maybe not for everybody. It's getting harder and harder to find the not intelligent, but the substantial meat of what makes us us.
Yeah, even a common thread, right? Because if you open that time capsule, let's say right now, it would be very incoherent. There's a lot of different
So much. Yep.
inputs, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
where's the narrative? There isn't really one. There's
Yeah.
a lot of competing narratives.
Yeah.
And then, kind of this like, it's like the classic melting pot of story, right? There's no linear arc, there's no hero's
Yeah.
journey, there's no Freytag's pyramid, like.
Yeah. Well, what's weird is in our class, in our humanities class, they're supposed to make a narrative based on the art from the beginning of time till now. If humanity was a character, how has humanity grown up? What changes do you see, and where's the arc, in how they've changed? Well, considering we're still having war, in 2022, and somebody put that on Instagram with a picture of 1940 and the Ukrainians kind of at the train station. Did you see that? And
No,
it's
I didn't.
a mass of people. It looks the same as, 70 years ago, however many years ago that is, 60
Wow.
plus 20, 80 years ago. So, okay, well, all right. Good luck with that. Calm me down.
Yeah, now that we're all fired up and passionate.
Calm me down.
So let's go ahead and get comfy, and I'm gonna extend my legs because my feet are falling asleep.
Okay. Mine too. We're both.
Oh, you're muted.
I said we're both sitting on the floor. We're crazy. Okay, I'm muting myself. Here I go.
I'm gonna do speaker view if I can figure it out. I don't know how, but
the top little dots.
Okay.
Got it.
Yeah, I think so. All right. So let's go ahead and just shut our eyes. Let yourself drop into your body. So you might feel like you're kind of up here, but you might not even know what that feels like. Just imagine that you're melting down away from your brain and into your limbs, into your core. And just feel the physicality of being embodied. And start to tune into the breath. Tuning into the heartbeat. Tuning into the sensations and the feelings and the emotions that have been arising as we've talked. I don't know if you guys are as charged up as we are, but I definitely feel charged up about it. And just be with that sensation. What if we unpack all the story and narrative behind those emotions and just let them be at their essence, their qualities, what's behind it all? You might call it passion, anger, frustration, inspiration. But what's even beyond that? You might feel heat or lightness or heaviness. Just letting that experience dissolve further and further away from conception into pure sensation. The pure sensation of being in your body in this moment that will never happen again. the pure sensation of the inhalation, the breath gliding past the nostrils, down the esophagus into the belly and chest, the rise of the belly and chest. And the pure sensation of the exhalation and the breath moving back out through the nostrils, the contraction of the belly and chest. And all the million tiny processes happening in the body as you breathe in and out. The sensation of being alive, of existing in this moment and this moment and this moment. Notice what the mind wants to do here. Whether there's a story about what you're doing next, or what you did today, or what you want to do in the future, who you want to be, who you want to become. And look behind that, dropping the story and even the identification with the person who is doing, and feel the raw drive, the raw desire, the qualities of desire itself. What does desire feel like in the body in this moment? Being with every urge as it comes up, every impulse as it arises without being acted on, simply sitting with it, welcoming it, making space for it. And getting curious about it from the heart space and not from the head. Curious to get to know it from the feeling center and not the thinking center. Making space for desire. The impulse to life. The impulse to make, to communicate, to express. Maybe even the impulse to take in, to embrace, to connect, to consume, to subsume the other into yourself. Noticing these different impulses dancing together, and whether they really are different after all, or whether they all stem from the same fundamental desire. Again, turning the attention to the breath. And the embodied experience of breathing in. And the embodied experience of breathing out. As you start to bring yourself back into the room that you're in, into the space that you're in, see if you can maintain the space that you've created for desire to exist, to have a home within you. And as you're ready, you can slowly start to wiggle the fingers and toes. And then gazing away from your screen, gently open the eyes.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, especially in light of the fire up. But I love how the other meditations sometimes say pop those thoughts like a bubble,
Mhm.
get rid of them. And we went into them and analyzed the desire and became close to the desire. I love it. It's so new to me. Thank you.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I'll
I'll
see you
see you
next time.
next time, 2 weeks. Mwah. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.